I just got off a podcast with Peter Dunworth. He has a very interesting thesis around the strategic Bitcoin reserve and why he thinks it will be happening this July, on July 4th, Independence Day. This alone would bring trillions of dollars of interest in the Bitcoin ecosystem just off the back of this announcement. Additionally, we talked about the SDSC stretch product that MicroStrategy, now Strategy, brought out and can change the bond market forever, and why the $1 million price target might be coming sooner than you expect. Enjoy.
I honestly think that Bitcoin has never looked as good as it looked right now. And it's 50% or 40% off from what it was like 6, 7 months ago. And I'm like, okay, like if you want to buy like the best toaster oven ever, and you just saw the toaster oven got like reduced by 50% and it got a new upgrade and like got a new feature, like why wouldn't you buy it? Like it's such a weird thing to love Bitcoin when it's going up and hate Bitcoin when it's going down.
Even stranger than that is you have every other asset or every other investable asset out there is at all-time highs or close to all-time highs, except maybe property. And you look at that and you think, well, everything just got dearer by 40% and Bitcoin's at a 40% discount. And it's by far the best investment out there. I look at that and think there's a serious knowledge gap out there between, broader retail or the broader market and Bitcoiners. But the beautiful thing about that is that information asymmetry is where we get outsized returns over the next 10 years.
Is that kind of also the perfect time to kind of, what should I say, like reposition yourself? If you have stocks, if you have real estate, if you have other assets as well, it's kind of the perfect time to reposition or reallocate towards Bitcoin?
I think it's really important. There are very few people I see who have the proper allocation to Bitcoin. And what we're seeing from around the globe is capital restrictions starting to take place now. And in that light, just running around the globe pretty quickly, South Africa has classified Bitcoin as property now, which means you can't leave South Africa with Bitcoin. They classify it as property, so they'll tax you on the way out. Australia has effectively a tax on the way out if you want to leave. You have capital controls coming into France and probably broader Europe. The UK is trying to cramp down on it. And this is the only asset that gives you protection from an overbearing government. And I look at that and think it's 40% off all-time highs from only 6 months ago. And this asset's on sale right now and you can buy it cheap.
100%, yeah. One thing that has, I think, actually changed in since we last spoke. I'm not sure if it was already there when we last spoke, but I don't think so. Was Stretch, the new preferred of Strategy, and I don't know how closely follow Strategy and all the things that they are doing, but it's such an interesting topic, and so many people are really loving to talk about that currently. How do you look at strategy change? That sounds so weird. Strategies change strategy around like preferred stocks and the huge volume that you have seen with Stretch coming in like the last couple of months.
I think Michael Seyr is very clever. I think there is some criticism leveled at him that he's not a Bitcoiner, and despite that, the only thing I tell him or I see him tell people to buy is Bitcoin. His stocks, on the other hand, represent a financial investment, which he can't tell anyone to do. But I think the advent of those preferred stocks with STRC is a genuine game changer. I think it's a tipping point. This is the fulcrum that basically leverages Bitcoin into the stratosphere, because we now have a permanent bidder for this. And what's really interesting is, and credit Croesus on this for putting this information out, that what he's doing is he's harnessing a $300 trillion asset class in the bond market and providing them a better product in many, many ways. A product that is over-collateralized, not under-collateralized, a product that has got less risk, product that's got greater return, lower tax consequences, and in my book is far more secure and stable than any other credit product out there that gives a much higher return on a tax-adjusted basis. Now, what Seyr's doing, which I think is brilliant, is he's tapping the biggest market on earth, which is the bond market, and trying to filter that into a vehicle that allows him to buy Bitcoin with it. And for the strategy shareholders, what I think is ingenious about this is this allows Seyr over time to increase the Bitcoin per share without any dilution. So that to me is an absolute critical component of it, because the only way to increase Bitcoin per share previously that Seyr had was to issue stock at a higher MNAV over 1. So that was when the stock itself was trading at a higher market cap than the actual underlying Bitcoin that they've got. Now with the STRC product, he can have Bitcoin accretion per share without any of the overheads or the equity dilution associated with issuing stock at a MNAV 1 or less than 1.
It's really interesting to see that. Do you actually expect something? I mean, I know your outlooks on Bitcoin is already extremely bullish, but has the constant bid that Stretch now allows from a whole new market segment, like a lot of TradFi people will probably come around that, people that search for income, the income investor crowd will come in there. Has that kind of even changed your outlook on Bitcoin, because there's now like a real structural product that brings a constant bid on Bitcoin, which makes a bear market to occur way harder because there's such a big buyer always in the market?
I didn't think we'd see a corporate with a perpetual bid on Bitcoin. That's what I didn't see. I thought it would be by now. I thought we'd be having, a government race to that. And if all things go according to plan, for a prediction, I had a conversation with earlier in the year, maybe even late last year. There's an expectation that the US will create a strategic Bitcoin reserve on the 4th of July. Ironically, it's Independence Day. And what better way to usher in Independence Day in the US than to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve issued that gives them sovereignty from a monetary sense. So I think that's on the cards. If that does happen, then that global reserve currency, which is the US, will lead to, I think, a nation state bidding war for Bitcoin within the next 5 years. So all of this is on the table, and that's in addition to having a perpetual bid, of a $300 trillion market that Michael Seyr is just plumbing straight into Bitcoin purchases.
This is crazy because, like, when you think about that, you have an asset that is at a very low valuation and like a 1.5 trillion, like under $2 trillion market cap currently, and has the potential to be 100 trillion, 200 trillion, 400 trillion dollars market cap. And you see that all the demand for it just got started. Like, we have a few hundred companies, maybe like 100, 150, 200 companies that are in that. We have now constant bids, like with strategy. Then we have a potential raise from governments to buy that shit. That is, if you look at all of that, it's kind of hard to not be excited. And then we have like this super low sentiment, and people are like, oh, why? Like it's going down. Like, why would you buy Bitcoin? And there's like extremely negative thinking. It's just like people need to zoom out a little bit.
I think that's just the exquisite nature of being human. There'll be a rush for the door when it's an all-time high, and when it's off 40%, no one wants to buy it. It's just, this is market behavior. This is human psychology. Sadly, we are fickle little beasts, with simple brains. We're not, we haven't really evolved much past that reptilian brain that drives greed and fear. And the funny thing is that greed and fear that drives us, that avoids the pain of buying when it's 40% off, ironically doesn't serve us as investors. And this is where over the next, say, 3 to 5 years, my expectation is that Bitcoin could easily go up 10 times in that 5-year period. So before, call it around 2030, we could see $1 million Bitcoin, which represents a 12 to 15x from where we are today.
Let's say, just for the fun of it, that the 4th of July actually happens. So the US is announcing some kind of Bitcoin strategic reserve. Strategies keep on buying. They probably go through the million Bitcoin, most likely this year that they accumulate. What will happen to Bitcoin when all those things kind of come into place? Because I think a lot of people still, to this day, expect Bitcoin to have a bear market year. What do you kind of expect from Bitcoin in 2026?
Oh, it's a very big question. And this is where I think having a very wide aperture of what to expect is really important as a Bitcoin investor. I think there's no doubt we could see a drop down to Bitcoin in the 50s or possibly high 40s. Do I think that's going to happen? No, but there's a chance that it could happen. And then the flip side of that is if we get nation state adoption, if we get sovereign wealth funds buying Bitcoin, if we get that plumbing dialed in, or Seyr gets the plumbing dialed in on the stretch product, we could see a bid of, tens of billions of dollars a week or per day for Bitcoin. And then that changes the outcome of this very, very quickly. Very quickly we would rocket to $1 million. And the ironic thing is when it hits, if it were to move that quickly over a, say, 6 or 12 month period where we get a 10x return, a lot of investors would look at this and think, this is outrageous. This is a bubble. We can't invest in it. And ironically, this is the start of it, because once we hit that scale, that size in market cap, that really announces to the world this is a legitimate asset. This is an asset that can be used as collateral. And I've talked a lot about Bitcoin as pristine collateral and the best form of collateral that we've got. But if you look at the broader economics around this, and just to divert this conversation for a very brief moment, everyone talks about there being a debt problem in the world, but no one talks about the fact that we've got a collateral crisis. And this is where the fractional reserve banking is literally at a breaking point. And what we need to do is recapitalize this financial system. And unfortunately, you can't recapitalize it with property because we're all propertied out. We're up to our eyeballs in debt to service what we've got in that capacity. You can't do that with stocks because, again, we're trading at somewhere between 30 to 50 times PE ratios for the stock market, or the top 7 anyway. So we're kind of full up in that capacity. We can't issue bonds to solve this problem because you can't solve a debt problem by issuing more debt. So the only way to create more collateral or more capital in the system is really to inflate an asset. And the only other asset remaining class outside of Bitcoin is the commodities. And you can't do that because that will increase the inflation for everything. So we'll have a rising cost of housing, rising cost of living, and that's something that we can't have. And the only way to solve that problem is really to recapitalize the financial system with Bitcoin, because it's got the lowest socioeconomic impact to day-to-day living.
That's an interesting aspect. I'm also wondering, of course, Bitcoin is still a young asset. It's has volatility a lot more than, let's say, a house has or real estate property has. So it can look scary for TradFi, especially if you don't believe in the asset long term. But I'm wondering, what does it hold back as a perfect collateral? Obviously it is, but the TradFi community clearly doesn't see it as perfect collateral. I mean, many banks don't see it as anything at all. The ones that do see it give you interest rates that are way too high, in my opinion. If you buy a real estate property, you can get interest rates 2, 3, 4, 5%. With Bitcoin, you get 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And I'm real estate properties are a lot harder to sell, a lot harder to liquidate, a lot harder to confiscate. I mean, Bitcoin, you can hold either directly yourself, as a lot of the platforms do, or in a multi-sig situation. You can liquidate within minutes. You can probably have it completely liquidated in 10, 20 minutes, and you have it. So what are you fearing if you have a loan to value of 25% or so? You're there must be a 75% crash in 1 hour for you to I don't understand why the rates for Bitcoin as a collateral are so high at the moment still.
Well, I think not a lot of people have your level of understanding of the risks associated with it, all the systems and processes around protecting yourself. But there are a number of lenders in the Bitcoin space who have a perfect record when it comes to zero defaults, no losses on their loan book when it comes to Bitcoin. And this is something that the major banks around the world aren't cognizant of just yet. They are working very hard to understand that. They're working really hard to put the systems in place so that they can take advantage of that. The important thing is that all of this is changing, and probably the most important thing that's happened over the last 2 years, despite all that we've seen, to me, one of, if not the most important thing that we've seen is the repeal of SAB 121 in the US, which was a regulation that required banks, if they were going to custody Bitcoin, they were required to hold the equivalent in cash on their balance sheet as a reserve to cover the Bitcoin if they lost it. Now, that makes custodying Bitcoin for the banks completely uneconomical. It is by default prohibitive for them to even look at custodying Bitcoin. And with the repeal of that, that sets up the opportunity for the banks in the US to now custody Bitcoin without it being penal or uneconomical for them. And it also, that is the linchpin, or sort of, tipping that boulder over the hill to get momentum, whereby once the custody sorted out, then the loan products, then the saving products can be developed around that. But without custody and the banks custodying that, we won't have any of those loans and savings products. So, and this is strange coming from a self-custody guy, and that's what I specialize in. But it's really important that those banks start offering those products, because as those products start getting filtered through the banks and more widely adopted, a number of things happen. Firstly, all of the banking customers end up being clients where they purchase Bitcoin. That gives them an opportunity to hold Bitcoin, whether it's on the bank account or alternatively into self-custody. And then that lets them start getting familiar with Bitcoin and all of the benefits to it. So I look at this as really top of funnel. And we're at the very early stages that all of these things that come into Bitcoin. And this is just, a multitude of reasons why the price of Bitcoin is going to go up dramatically over the next, say, 10 years.
This actually brings me, because you mentioned self-custody, and we now talk so much about strategy and stretch and the collateral and all of those things. I personally, and I'm curious if you have a framework or a thinking around that. I personally always have 70 to 80% of my net worth, my liquid net worth, in Bitcoin self-custody. That's kind of my golden rule. I want to have the majority always in Bitcoin self-custody, and with the remaining 20 to 30%, I play with strategy and cash. And I'm thinking a little bit about stretch. I'm not sure yet, because I like the upside more than the cash, because I have enough monthly cash coming in. But it is an interesting way of parking cash for the next 6 months or next 12 months, because as we discussed before, we don't really have a clue if Bitcoin will end up at 50K end of the year or 250K end of the year. Both things are very much possible. But I know stretch will probably not be dunking too much, and probably gives me a nice dividend up until then, which gives me more powder to buy Bitcoin, definitely more powder than I just keep in fiat cash. How do you look at Bitcoin and the ecosystem around Bitcoin changing personal finance? I mean, there was a 60-40 portfolio that was previously there with equity and bonds. I think that's just completely out of the window now. But how do you look for as Bitcoiner for what we should do with personal finance?
I think on a personal note, you want to hold as much Bitcoin as you feel comfortable holding. For some people, that represents a 1% exposure. For you, it represents 70 or 80%. For others, it can represent 100 or 110, 130% exposure. And this is where I think it comes down to personal preference. It's really important to understand what you're holding. I haven't had the experience of telling a client not to buy any more Bitcoin. Actually, there is one example where I have talked a client out of buying Bitcoin, and we agreed that it was a really good idea to buy Bitcoin. But the client said to me, "Look, I'm all for it, but my wife said she'll divorce me if I buy any more Bitcoin." So sadly, we had to lose the battle, win the war, and be satisfied with whatever was stacked at that moment in time was going to be what they were happy with. So I think it's really important about understanding your personal situation. And I guess the most important thing I can talk about to this point is, from a good friend of ours, Jeff Booth. just learn as much as you can. And the more you learn about Bitcoin, the more you'll buy. So I think it's our job, and you do a absolutely bang up performance of doing a great job in educating people. But it's really important, the more podcasts you listen to, the more books you read on Bitcoin, the more opinions you seek, the deeper work that you do, the more comfortable you feel with Bitcoin. And that usually leads to a higher allocation, whether it's through the natural accretion in price of Bitcoin over time, or alternatively being proactive and actually selling assets to get greater exposure.
That's actually something we don't talk enough about, the importance of getting the people around you on board. And it's a hard thing, like, because you don't want to push it on someone. There has to be some kind of motivation from that person, no matter if it's your wife, a friend of yours, a good friend of yours, your dad, your son, your whatever the 10 closest people in your social circle are. You benefit a lot more from Bitcoin if they also understand Bitcoin, and it's not just you, not just because you in a wife situation you can buy more Bitcoin if she's also on board, like that's like a very obvious one. But even like if you think about the world we are moving in, and if they save in like bonds and some S&P 500 plus some cash, and you have like Bitcoin strategy and like stretch, like your balance sheet is just like so much supercharged against them. So you will probably outperform them by such a great margin. And I feel like there is almost like a small obligation that we as humans have to lift up our neighbors, to lift up our family, to lift up our friends, and help them in any way, shape, or form we can. And so if you have that like deep insider information about Bitcoin, I think we have kind of an obligation to at least show them, or at least educate them, at least be there for them when it comes to Bitcoin, which can be hard. I see that, but like I think we don't talk about that enough, like orange pilling your closest social circle.
And the reason why we don't, I think, is because it's very difficult. There's a Bible passage that says a prophet has no honor in his hometown. It's often hardest for those closest to us to hear a message that's helpful for them. And I think as a Bitcoiner, we all suffer from that. Like, you've got a podcast, you've interviewed just about every person in Bitcoin of import, and I dare say you still have people in your close circles who don't listen to you about Bitcoin. And
I do.
I have that too. So I'm not bringing that up to say, hey, we can all do a better job. But this is one of the funny things about what we do with our work at the Bitcoin Advisor. A lot of people think that we are there to support the Bitcoiner in securing their Bitcoin. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The Bitcoiners we work with, they all know how to secure their Bitcoin. They come to us because we help their partners get comfortable with them securing their Bitcoin. And that to me is a huge unlock, when the partner realizes that their partner, their husband, their wife, whoever it might be, is sensible and has a team around them to support them, that they can't lose their Bitcoin. Then, and this is part of the great fun that I have with clients, this is part of the real juice in what I do, is I get to talk to clients, I get to meet their families, and then just through spending time through osmosis with them, we get comfortable with each other, and it ultimately leads to the client being able to purchase more Bitcoin because they understand that they've got a team around them. The non-Bitcoiners in the family now have a resource that they can call on if anything happens to the family member who's the Bitcoiner. And more importantly, the Bitcoiner in the family gets to hold more Bitcoin because everyone's comfortable with the transaction and the investment. And that's to me part of the real fun, that community that is Bitcoin. We get to, I think, work with the best people in the world.
It's such an interesting thing. Like, I love your message also because it's so positive. And I see it here and there from some Bitcoiners that paint a very dark picture of like what fiat brings to us and all of those things. So how do you actually look at the world that we are kind of moving in, knowing what you know about the fiat system, knowing about what you know about the monetary system, the political system that is influenced by the monetary system, and the hope that Bitcoin kind of brings? Because I like your hopeful and optimistic outlook. I sometimes miss that in Bitcoiner circles. I sometimes hear Bitcoiners come up to me and say like they're they're concerned about the world we're going into, because like the fiat system and all those bad things that come from that. If you live in Europe like I do and want to buy Bitcoin the right way, check out Relai. Relai is a Bitcoin-only platform with no distractions, no shitcoins, just a BTC. It's also the easiest way I've found to do what actually works: buying Bitcoin on a consistent basis. Relai is also self-custodial. They never have the keys to your Bitcoin. No freezing of your assets, no counterparty risk, no rug pulling whatsoever. I have been a long-term fan of Relai, not only because it's incredible, easy to use and very beginner friendly, but also because it just works. If you want to get started with Relai today, click the link down in the pinned comment or in the description, and once you have downloaded the app, type in Robin in the referral code section of the app to save 10% on fees. So set up your DCA Bitcoin plan today with the Relai app and get cheaper Bitcoin if you use code Robin. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Finally, we have BTC Prague back in 2026. And this year, I'm not only speaking on a panel, but I'm actually going to present an interesting new angle, a perspective, a Bitcoin thesis at BTC Prague this year for the first time ever. I've never done that on any other conference, so this will be a fun one. If you listen to this show on a regular basis, I would love to meet you in Prague this year. It's very high signal, no noise, and Prague is just a freaking amazing city with awesome drinks and a lot of good food. Use code Robin to get 10% off, and if you buy with Bitcoin, you get an additional 5% off your ticket price. I'll see you there in Prague. Make sure to come say hi.
That's a very good point, but I think it comes down to, how do you want to live? Do you want to live with an optimistic outlook? Do you want to be hopeful for the future? Do you want to think that humanity is going to be better off in the future? The only way to do that, I think, is to buy Bitcoin and then help others buy Bitcoin, because that's a saving grace for us. And this is where maybe focusing on the light rather than the dark when it comes to what's coming. There's a time and a place for the dark, and I think everyone will learn what's coming at their own time. But to me, what Bitcoin offers is the opportunity to be financially free. And this is where I dare say the reason and the work, why we work so hard on Talk About Bitcoin and trying to get our loved ones, family, friends, and anyone who listen to us into Bitcoin, is because it offers a hopeful future for everyone. And the reason we can say that is because we've been beneficiaries of that. And I think part of the reason, if you look at, say, just from a psychological perspective, when it comes to us and Bitcoin, we've been the beneficiaries of, say, watching the price of Bitcoin go up and benefiting from that. And we want those around us, the ones that we love and, that we cherish. We want those people around us to benefit from what we've benefited from. And if we can get our friends and family onto the treadmill of just buying and holding Bitcoin and holding it for an extended period of time, to me, that is the fastest way for us to level up our personal communities up through that Maslow's needs hierarchy and hopefully to self-actualization in the fastest way possible.
I like that. And especially now in those times, I mean, we mentioned it briefly in the beginning. I think this dip that we are currently living in is one of the biggest opportunities I've seen in Bitcoin, I think, since I started. I started exactly also in an interesting opportunity area in 2020 when it crashed down to I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000, something like that, after like the COVID thing. And that's actually like right around when I started. Like I think the first bought was like 5,000-6,000 per coin, which was an amazing buying opportunity. And it was amazing because like you bought and like most it has gone up afterwards that. I mean, 2021, then there was a huge crash from like, I don't know, 69 to like 16,000, which was obviously hard for a lot of Bitcoiners. But I think this right here represents like the biggest opportunity I've seen since the 2021 crash, which kind of is funny because if you think about how much more mature and how much more accepted, how much better Bitcoin currently is against like the 3, 4, 5 years ago, it's huge. Like it's a true opportunity for people.
Yet here we are with a negative sentiment around Bitcoin. We're trading at 75 to 80,000 US a coin. You know, what's changed since now and 5 years ago? Well, the price was circa, what was it, 15,500 5 years ago. It's now sitting 5 times higher than that. We now have regulatory approval from the US. We're no longer sitting under Damocles' sword thinking that one hair hanging on to the sword could fall on our head at any time and the SEC could just wipe Bitcoin or try and kill it. We've seen China try and ban it multiple times. They haven't been able to. They've banned Bitcoin mining. It literally halved the network in a period of less than 3 days, and Bitcoin still resolved and won. It kept working as advertised. It just was a little bit slow for 3 weeks. What we've seen over the last 5 years is a completely different beast to what we had 5 years ago when it comes to Bitcoin. And I guess back to this beautiful nature of humans, we're never satisfied.
Yeah, I guess that's the case. I don't know. Like you reach higher points and you're like, oh, that's not enough. You reach higher points. Oh, that's like, I'm not satisfied. Like I still feel it's actually interesting. Like you've built a business and like I'm at the very start of my whole journey. But I've reached every year and I'm now in the 3rd year, a higher level. Like almost every quarter has been better than the previous one. And I still feel it, the same feeling, the same kind of weird, unsatisfied thing that I felt like before I even started. They were like, oh, I want that. And like, oh, I got that. Now I want that. Oh, I got that. Now I want that. Oh, I got that. And now I want that. It's like, it's a weird psychology. Like, it's hard to step back and say, hey, I have enough. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners feel like that with their stack, that they buy their first 0.1 Bitcoin and they're like, oh, that's amazing. But now I want 0.5. Then they have 0.5 and they're like, okay, now I want to have a whole coin. Then they have like 1.2 coins and then they're like, I want to have 10 coins. Like I want to be a Satoshi billionaire. Like I want to have like this and that. And like, oh, 10 coins. Why don't I have 50 coins? And at some point you have to say like, hey, maybe relax. Maybe it's you have a good enough stack. Like give your family some time. Like whatever it is, like whatever you want to do. But I don't know. I think it's hard for Bitcoiners to say, hey, that's a good amount. Like I think enough is enough.
Someone tell that to Seyr.
Yeah, like, he's going for 1 million. Like that's crazy.
It's good to see, and this is congratulations on being human. This is what it is to be human. We want more. We want to do better. We want to strive, and this is why I guess we're the apex predator of Earth. And Bitcoin represents a very fair competition. It's fair from a Bitcoin mining perspective. It's fair from a Bitcoin accumulation perspective. If you're smart, if you're ahead of the curve, if you have the ability to buy Bitcoin and hold on to it, that will serve you really well through time. But a lot of people don't understand what this is. A lot of people are too lazy to put the work in to really understand it. And then, this is the game that all Bitcoiners play. They want to buy Bitcoin and they want more and more Bitcoin and they don't want to sell it. And this is where, this move to, I guess, the institutionalization of Bitcoin, the collateralization of Bitcoin and, big banks being able to custody it allows for more and more Bitcoiners to never sell their Bitcoin.
I recently got the question, like I think it was actually in Vegas, someone came up to me and like he asked me if I measure my net worth in Bitcoin. And I have a funny answer for that. I'm curious how you think about that. I measure my net worth in time. So I have literally like an Excel sheet where I track way too often how much my liquid net worth is and like Bitcoin with the strategy shares and all of those things. And then at the end, there's a column saying like the number. And then I have another column saying how much I roughly need to live per month. And then I divide those two numbers, and then there's a month number coming out. Like how many months could I live just from my liquid net worth? And this is how I define wealth. It's not about one having like, oh, like if you have one Bitcoin, you're like doing amazing, or if you have only 0.1 Bitcoin, you're doing bad, because it depends also like what is your monthly, like if you live in India, the Bitcoin you need is a lot different if you live in like New York City. There's like two very different stacks you need to like be wealthy. And so I like to look at how many months of living I have, and look at that as like my wealth status. Now the question, and I don't know if you have a formula or like some framework to think about that. How many months do you think is enough for a human being to say, like, that's a good amount of stack? Like, how many months of liquid net worth of runway of your expenses, if you just have it in Bitcoin, is a thing that, like, if I hit that number, like, I'm really like fine. Maybe not retired, but like I'm feeling really secure and nice. And this is a great way of like finally and have a number where I'm like, my stack is enough.
I'd say 84 months.
Which is like 7 years.
7 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is that a number where you think? I was just like asking if that is a number where you say like you could potentially even retire because you have such a long stack that the appreciation of Bitcoin might go up enough for you to have like endless months in the end of it.
That's exactly right. I think, one of our advisors, Hats, does a great job. He talks about being able to spend 10% of your Bitcoin every year. And basically that'll never run out. So 7 years, I think, is a little bit higher than that. But that, 84 months would give you a really good runway. And I think, particularly if you're starting from now, that would be a really great way to do it because, I don't think you'll ever run out of Bitcoin, particularly with, I think, the gains that we're going to have over the next 2 or 3 years. I think by 2030, we could have a 10x return from here. And then all of a sudden, you'll need to up that monthly spend to come anywhere close to spending all your Bitcoin in your lifetime.
I like that way because I like to measure things in time. I don't know, like if you also do that, but like I like to measure things in like how many months do I have, how many years do I have. If everything goes bust right now, like this second, how many days, months, weeks, years? But hopefully it's years. You have left to live without spending anything.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it, and this is where I guess the introduction of Bitcoin has really created a great awareness for you around how important time is, and that's the ultimate commodity.
Yeah, time is huge. One thing I just came to my mind is gold also. I was massively surprised by gold. The development of gold in the last year, I was massively surprised by what gold did. What, first of all, like, were you also surprised? And second, like, what does this mean for Bitcoin and overall the financial system that gold did so much better than I think most people thought, except maybe Peter Schiff?
Good on Peter. He had a great year last year. It's nice to see him get 1 in 17. I think gold, to me, the important thing about what we saw with gold over the last, say, 12 to 18 months is you can have an asset class, like a huge asset class, $20 trillion asset class, go up 50, 60, 70% in a year and still look cheap. Now, what that looks like to me is when we convert it to Bitcoin, Bitcoin can go up 10x from here and still look cheap. If Bitcoin did a $12 trillion gain in 1 year, that would effectively be a 10x in a year. And it's possible with gold. Why isn't it possible with Bitcoin? And this is where I look at a whole host of things. But gold is ultimately a commodity. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with what's happened to the diamond industry.
The what industry?
The diamond, the shiny things.
My English is not good enough for that word, I think.
Oh, diamonds. Like
diamonds. Oh, diamonds. Oh, super. Sorry. Yeah, diamonds. Yeah, now I got it.
Have you seen what's happened to the diamond market?
I mean, I'm aware that there are artificial diamonds that you basically can't distinguish from the real ones because they're so good. Like they're lab grown, like the lab grown ones, not the plastic on the lab grown ones, which I imagine crashed the price of the real ones.
Well, yeah, and this is only we need to fact check this. So this is only fiction, but I did hear that De Beers was for sale, or one of the major diamond companies was for sale. They did not get a single bid. No one wanted to buy them. Why is that? Because they're producing basically lab-grown diamonds that are just as good as the real thing for next to nothing. And I look at that and you pair that with the innovation in AI and think, how long before we figure out how to reproduce gold? Now, if you study some of the science magazines, there's a whole host of articles talking about being able to replicate gold at for a cost of $5,000 an ounce. Lo and behold, where's the price of gold right now? $5,000 an ounce.
That would be crazy. Like if we can reproduce gold, just like a lab grown, because we also talk like I usually talk in like the inflation of gold is already bad because you think about it from like 100, 200 years, even if it's like 1-2%, that's already like diminishing your value of the gold in total a lot. But then we have the possibility of like going in outer space and finding something. We get better technologies to find it on Earth, like with robots and like artificial intelligence. But then I have never considered that we might just be able to grow gold. That's a crazy thought.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really good point. With the innovation around robotics and AI, 2/3 of the world's surface is underwater. What happens when we get robotics that can just mine Bitcoin off the bottom of the sea? Mine gold off the bottom of the sea, sorry. You can't mine Bitcoin off the bottom of it, but you can mine gold. That's roughly 2/3 of the world supply should be found at the bottom of the seafloor. But we haven't even looked at that. I don't even know anyone who's doing that economically now. So there are so many threats to gold that's a $30 trillion market cap that Bitcoin's immune to. So I look at this and think there's a whole host of factors converging into making Bitcoin the ultimate asset. And this is where it's really easy to get lost in the doomsayers and doom scroll and get really despondent and disappointed about what the future holds. But I look at it and think Bitcoin really represents hope. It's the only way to preserve your time. You measure all of your unit of account is time. And I think the message is none of us have enough of it. And, Michael Saylor, who'll have 1 million Bitcoin in a minute, I don't think he's going to get to 1 million and start thinking, oh, I've got too much Bitcoin now, I can stop. I've done my job. No, it's a perpetual game that everyone can play.
Do you think there is some kind of top for him? Like, is there like I don't know, 5% of supply, 10% of the supply, where like he realistically can't buy a lot more than that? Is there like a top that you think?
No, because I think regulations will stop him before he stops himself or ruins the market. I think, he's from what I can tell, he has studied Rockefeller in depth. And Rockefeller was instrumental in consolidating all of those small oil companies, creating Standard Oil, literally control and dominating an entire industry, set up banks, set up ancillary services, controlled supply chain from top to bottom. And then the US government came along and basically created a legislation that ensured that Rockefeller had to split his empire apart. And I don't think it's lost on Saylor to think that the US government could come along and do that if he controls too much Bitcoin. They'll just come along and bust up strategy.
He talks also a lot about Standard Oil and what he did with Stretch. Like the oil comparison actually comes in quite some time when he talks on podcasts and all of those things. How do you think this busting up strategy might look, that he can buy more, that they might even nationalize? I mean, some people talk about nationalizing the Bitcoin that they have for strategic reserves purposes.
I think you'll get that split into multiple different companies. That'll probably happen in less than 10 years, is my expectation. And I think I'm hoping Seyr gets rewarded handsomely for it, but I think you'll end up with multiple different companies that are spawned from the Bitcoin that's held by strategy. I think the US government will take some. I think they'll create coffers for their own strategic Bitcoin reserve, and it would not shock me in the next 10 years to see strategy basically dissolved through, for anti-competitive reasons, because they have too much control over a single market.
Interesting. One thing on the gold I forgot to ask you, because I think it's really interesting, because we compare Bitcoin a lot to digital, like compare Bitcoin as like digital gold, and there are books around. I mean, Seyfedin and Moose, also like the gold comparison to Bitcoin comes very handy. Is gold kind of the first enemy of Bitcoin, or like an enemy even of Bitcoin?
I would like to look at it in a very different framing. I think gold and Bitcoin are like brothers, close cousins. I think there's a huge amount of work and intellect needs to go into understanding gold, and Bitcoin, once you understand gold, is a very easy transition to make. I actually think they're mutually beneficial, and they're not competitive at all. In fact, when I see the price of gold go through the roof, that actually, to me, is very good for Bitcoin, because it shows that the total addressable market cap for Bitcoin has grown significantly. So I actually think they're good for one another, and not detrimental.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together.
It's interesting because I never got the value of gold, and I never got the why people invest in gold. Then I learned about Bitcoin, and then I understood why people invest in gold. So like, for me, actually, Bitcoin brought me closer to investing in gold. I still don't do it. I mean, I still have like one gold coin, which is fun. Like I have like one gold coin where I'm just like seeing the price of it when I got it, and the price of it now at I think roughly 4x since I got it, which I'm like, oh wow, like that shiny rock 4x since I got it. That's just crazy. Not anything close to what Bitcoin did, but it's just like I never thought about it when I got it. But yeah, it's gold is an interesting one. Like if you get Bitcoin, you almost have to get also a gold. And I'm actually curious, because if you get Bitcoin, like, why haven't you been a gold bug before? That's always the question that I have, because I haven't been a gold bug before. But like, if you really get Bitcoin, what Bitcoin is, you should have been a gold bug before you've understood Bitcoin is. Isn't that is that a logical conclusion that I have?
That's a very logical conclusion. And you know what? When I hear that, I sit back and think that's a really good question. Like, that's a really, really good question. And I sit back and think, you know, it's easy to look at that now. Gold being up, what is it, 50, 60, 70, 80% in the last 12 months. But gold has been relatively subdued for a very long period of time, you know, prior to, say, 5 years ago. So I think it was very easy to get lost on it, particularly if you're new to investing and having a look at it and thinking, hang on a second, everything's gone up dramatically since, you know, the global financial crisis. Since 2008, we're 4 or 5x on the S&P 500. And at that period of time, gold hadn't done that. Gold was, you know, basically lagging on a relative basis. So it had underperformed the S&P stocks and the rest of it. So, you know, all of this stuff is seasonal. And this is back to the earlier conversation we had about, you know, the reptilian brain that we're working with. We are only attracted to those flashy things, and those flashy things are going up a lot. We want to have a look at it. And ironically, this is, you know, further proof that Bitcoin right now is the best time to be buying. And, you know, not in 6 or 12 months when it's gone up 60, 70, 80%, and it's breaking all-time highs.
Really interesting. One more topic that I want to get into before the end routine is the Bitcoin ETFs. We've talked about it most definitely on the last one, but they were a lot younger back then when we talked about it. I mean, they are now there since a little bit over 2 years. Like 2024 they got introduced. Now it's the 2026 May. So like they are like 2 years and like what, 5 months about old. How have you seen the Bitcoin ETFs? Is there anything that is for you like worth noting in the Bitcoin ETFs? How did they performed? How they kind of held on also in the bear market, and what you kind of seen with the Bitcoin ETFs in the last like 2.5 years?
The biggest takeaway for me is how successful they've been as a financial product for the issuers. For BlackRock, that is the most profitable fund that they have, despite not being the biggest. It's their most profitable because they get to monetize the volatility on the back of it. It's been so successful that a lot of the big banks that said they'd never do it, like JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley, they were happy to let the ETFs go. They never wanted it. And then they've seen the success that these companies have had, particularly BlackRock, and they've said, we want to have a piece of that. And most importantly, those companies, Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan, have got huge client bases. They look after and manage trillions, if not tens of trillions of dollars. And they're going to funnel all of their clients into having 2 to 3, 5, maybe even 10% of their net assets holding those ETFs. So from a financial success perspective, I think they've been an outrageous success for these banks. They're making a fortune. From from a concern perspective, when it comes to Bitcoin, what I would like to see across all of these ETFs is the ability to have in-kind redemption. So the ability to withdraw your Bitcoin from that fund at any point in time. I think that would serve a number of different purposes. Firstly, it would allow any investor to take self-custody of that Bitcoin. It would, by default, solve a problem of proof of reserves because, if the fund had the ability to do in-kind redemptions and they were basically fractionally reserved selling their Bitcoin that they held within the fund, or they had overexposure or underexposure, they'd get found out pretty quickly. And most importantly, I still want to see or have the ability for clients to self-custody that Bitcoin, because to me, that is the ultimate hedge, the ultimate protection. It gives you the ultimate optionality to protect yourself moving forward. And once Bitcoin becomes ubiquitous across the global banks, you will want to have the underlying asset, not the ETF. And there is a huge benefit to owning the underlying. And so this is where, say, from a concern perspective, I would love to see in-kind redemptions of Bitcoin offered by those ETFs.
I think the European actually already have it. I don't buy ETFs, so I don't know exactly, but I've heard from the European issuers that some of them actually already have in-kind redemption, which is I think, an amazing thing if you can actually redeem those Bitcoin, which also holds them more accountable. Like as you said, it's a great thing to have in-kind redemptions, to have more transparency. What do you think of proof of reserves? Sorry to jump back to strategy, but now that we talk about transparency, Seyr always kind of tosses that question off with like security concerns, and like maybe also he's concerned that if people watch that address all day long and there's something moving internally, all of a sudden this stock crashes because people think they sold some Bitcoin. Like there's like a lot of concerns with a publicly traded company and having proof of reserve. But like, would it be a beneficial thing? Like, how do you think about proof of reserve, especially for a huge company like Strategy?
Well, I think it'd be hugely beneficial for the broader Bitcoin community. It may be very disadvantageous to Strategy shareholders and Michael Saylor. So I understand his point of view. I think he's one of, if not the smartest in Bitcoin. He's been a great servant for Bitcoin. I don't think anyone's done a better job of shilling Bitcoin over the last 5 years, or probably 6 or 7 years, than Michael himself. Maybe give him a little bit of leeway or grace, but from a Bitcoin community, I would love to see proof of reserves for Strategy, because it enables you to see exactly what's going on chain. And this is the fear that we've got from, well-founded fear. We've got, a whole host of examples that we can draw on from less than 3 years ago. We've got, I'll call it less than 4 years ago, we've got FTX, we've got Celsius, we've got Genesis, we've got BlockFi. We've had a whole host of companies blow up in this space who we thought were good actors. And, they never provided proof of reserves. And ultimately, the Bitcoin maxis were proven correct that, they were running a Ponzi scam. So, look, I think it's a tough one. I like to give Michael as much leeway as possible, because I think his service to Bitcoin has been second to none over that period of time. So, from a personal point of view, I'd love to see it, because more transparency is a good thing. And I'm, failing to see where more transparency for the broader market is a bad thing. I think you'd be hard pressed finding examples of that. But from Michael's perspective, Saylor's perspective, and Strategies and their shareholders, it might not be a good thing, and I can understand that point of view too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it would just give, like, I'm really curious, because like I'm always for transparency, especially if you hold that many Bitcoin. But I'm just thinking of, like, if I would sit in the chair of like Seyr, or I guess in the chair of Fong Li, and think about what are the potential attack surfaces for my company and my shareholders, just providing the proof of reserves. There's a lot of attack surface. There's a lot of Twitter trolls that are 24/7 looking at my addresses, and then there's something moving, and they interpret it, they false, or maybe interpret it correctly, but try to paint it in the wrong direction. There's so many, I don't know, short sellers and stock haters as Seyr and Strategy has. Again, I'm all for proof of reserve, and I would love to see it. But if I put myself in the shoes of Seyr, I'm like, maybe it's a thing that I don't need. Maybe, I don't know, like it's a headache maybe.
There are so many headaches. This is where I'm like, think about being Seyr. He's worth hundreds of millions, if not billions, multi-billionaire. And he puts himself in direct line of fire for all of the Bitcoin plebs out there to voice their opinions on how he should be doing his job. I'm like, he's very patient, very, very patient. I don't know how he does it, but yeah, I think
that's true, actually. That is true. He already has a lot of headaches. But yeah, I guess he learned a lot in his long career being a CEO of a publicly traded company. He has I think a very thick skin and a good way to handle stress. Otherwise he wouldn't be here anymore. But yeah, let's come to the end routine of the podcast, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. I swear today you got a really good one, like a really nice one.
Like the other time.
Yeah, like we have a history. And it's a really nice one because I know the average age of my listeners around 40 to 50 years old. And then I think a lot of them have maybe young kids. And the previous guest asked you the question, if you could give an 18-year-old kid only one advice today that has nothing to do with Bitcoin, what would that be?
One piece of advice?
Yes, one piece of one piece of advice outside of Bitcoin.
Stay curious. Be as curious as you can. It will serve you well. I think that will lead to a whole host of things that you've got no idea what will come from that. But maintaining that curiosity and that willingness to learn is invaluable, particularly in this market where AI is disrupting everything. I think curiosity will be a superpower.
I love that. That's I would have gone in a different direction, and I would have ended up in a similar outcome. I would have said something with like, stay a critical thinker, which requires you to stay curious and stay always learning. I love that. Really, really cool. Thank you so much, Peter, for being on the podcast. Man, an hour with you flies by very quickly. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you, the Bitcoin Advisor, and all the things that you're doing?
Well, I'm very easy to find. I'm on X at Peter BTC Advisor with an ER. I run a business called The Bitcoin Advisor, and that's literally thebitcoinadvisor.com. Advisor with an ER. And what we do is we help people self-custody their Bitcoin. We put that into a secure setup of self-custody that ensures that they can't lose their Bitcoin. And we basically put that in a framework that allows them to have an estate plan protocol to recover their Bitcoin in the event that they die. So this is one of the great things that I get to do. I get to talk to Bitcoiners all day, every day about protecting their Bitcoin, securing it, and most importantly, meeting their families to show them how to recover that if the Bitcoiner in the family is not there. So if any of your listeners would like to talk to us about that, literally, we love doing that day in, day out. So we'd love to help in any way, shape or form.
Thank you so much, Peter. You're doing God's work, or should I say Satoshi's work. So thank you so much for doing all the things that you're doing. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.